color? And I said my favorite color was polka dots. And she said, polka dots aren't a color. And I go, well, they should be, you know. It's just surrounding yourself with happy things. Earliest memories of me playing in art, I was a Girl Scout in 2nd grade, and they had some ice cream social contest, and my poster won. I don't know that I ever heard the term maker until the last 5 years or so, and I realized that's probably a better descriptor of me. I had family members that were makers, and an aunt that canned and grew vegetables and sewed and then caned hickory chairs and was constantly creating. And I don't know that I had ever focused on that until I retired. And so I just began exploring lots of different kinds of things that I could make. I started asking my husband if I could take the kids' playroom when I was no longer subbing and I wanted to make some extra money for spending money. I said, can I take the kids' playroom and turn it into a craft room? And I think he thought it was going to be a card table with a glue gun. And I built this 8-foot table, and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I was going to create something that I was going to sell. And he said to me, I ordered a Lazy Boy and a 60-inch TV, and he goes, what are you doing over there? And I said, I don't know, but if you build it, it will come. And I spent a lot of time looking on Pinterest and on Etsy, and I kept seeing this organic jewelry that I was really drawn to, lots of leaves and folds, and it was sculpted and it was made. It wasn't just sheet metal punched out. And somewhere in an artist write-up on Etsy, it talked about precious metal clay. And so that was my first introduction to the medium. And so I started Googling and YouTubing and reading and watching. And then I found, by searching in Kansas City, Gail Schlegel's an artist that lives in the southern part of the city that had been doing metal clay for a number of years, and she taught classes. So I contacted her, and I spent about 6 months down in her home. There was a phase of playing with pipe lamps, and I thought about furniture, and it was too hard for where you're going to store it and how are you going to sell it and where will you send it to. And so I just went through all these iterations of things. But jewelry was small, there was Etsy sites you could sell on, and I hadn't thought of artist or gallery. I was just thinking of where could I take something to a market and sell it. And jewelry was packable and shippable, and it just seemed like a great medium. My mother and I both had a love of jewelry, always, and we were always buying casual jewelry or sharing jewelry that had been family pieces and accessorizing with them. So I think that made it a really comfortable fit also. But that's where I began. And so I did precious metal, sterling silver, fine silver jewelry. And I got into the gallery at Applefest up in Weston. I strolled by and saw the gallery, and they just happened to have a jeweler's opening. And I had been making jewelry for about 3 months at that point and hardly had enough inventory to fill a case. But I worked really hard for several weekends, and that's kind of where it started. Then 2 years ago, then the eggshells came about. And that was, I needed artwork for a guest room. And I bought watercolor paper and some Yupo paper, and I was going to play around with watercolor. And I like buying artwork from other artists, people that I've met or people that I have a relationship with, but I wanted to make my own artwork. And so I painted eggshells for about 3 months. With the Yupo paper and the watercolor paper, the texture was so rough and dry, and I liked the Yupo paper, the way it would flow a little bit on it. And that morning I was making an omelet for my husband, and the inside of that eggshell was so smooth and perfectly white and no blemishes. And so I started looking at it and I thought, I wonder if I can paint on that. And I tried watercolor and I tried acrylic paint. And then I began playing with the alcohol ink that I'd done on the Yupo paper on the eggshells. And then it was just 3 months of painting the eggshells and trying different things and what kind of embellishments do I want to do on them. I had searched for eggshell artists and found on Etsy, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, Google, eBay, Facebook. I found 7 artists that paint the insides of eggshells. That was it, 7. The colors were really bold, and that was something I didn't like in the silver jewelry, was a lack of color. I played with stones but didn't enjoy it. And this just lit up my world to have so much color coming into my work. I began thinking about the art form of kintsugi, the wabi-sabi, that the balance of imperfection and taking something and creating a form out of parts and pieces. And that kind of touched my heart, all those quotes about that we're beautifully broken, that we are, all of us, broken and flawed. And it's those flaws that make us who we are. It's those life experiences that have brought us to where we are supposed to be. That probably has held my attention and focus art-wise for longer than anything else, because I keep coming back to that journey of life and where I'm at and all the previous chapters of my life that I've come through. That really resonates and connects, I think, with other people. Then I began messing around in antique stores, which was something I had done with my grandmother when I was young. And I kept finding these parts and pieces of things. And I met a lady, another Kansas City artist, who did assemblage sculptures. And I just thought they were so fun. And they reminded me of my unique students, those different drummer kids that all had funny, crazy personalities. And I wanted to try and capture that in some sculptures. So I spent a snowy, icy January, February, and began kind of sculpting things. And it dawned on me that the antique pieces I picked up were from the era of all my family members that I had these treasured memories of. And so I began sculpting people or pets and animals from stories from my family. The lady that I met that was the sculptor, she would create a face and then she would go find body parts. And for me, I was connecting to the antique and being reminded of a story or a person in my family, and I went that direction from it. So the antique drove what the sculpture was going to become. Then I would hand sculpt out the faces and body parts that I needed to complete that person. But they all had stories, and elaboration is probably one of my strength areas, looking for what else do you bring to the story that adds richness and helps the viewer connect to what I was seeing in my creative eye. And so I made story cards that went with each of them that told the background on where these come from. And I think as you walk by and you see a piece of art or you see an object, it doesn't have near as much meaning as if you hear the artist talk about what drove them to create what they've made. And it's those funny stories that make the artwork so much better. Without the story, the artwork may be interesting, but it doesn't keep your attention. So the pieces of artwork that I end up being the most proud of, the ones that I love and I'm engaged and connected to, also are the ones that I find buyers, which has been a whole new selling world that I had never explored in my careers. The ones that had meaning to me have meaning to them. And so the process for me, a lot of times I don't know where it's going to go. I start with a color, in the case of the eggshells, and I just grab up a dozen eggshells and peel the lining and prep them and get them ready. And I just start with one color. And I don't know, is it going to be jewelry? Is it going to be a frame piece? Sometimes there's a quote I've come across that has been mulling through my head that has meaning to me that I want to weave into the piece, then I have more direction. But the growth for me as an artist has come with permission for myself to not know where it's going. I can start with a blank slate and not really have an idea of what this is going to be. And then I just kind of move through it. Discovering that I've always been an artist, that when I was doing units with my students and we built a rainforest all the way down the hallway, that was my art. And when Prince Harry got married and I invited my girlfriends over and we had a royal wedding party and we made a wedding cake for it and decorated the house, and I made a throne for us to do pictures. I've always been doing art. And so when I look back on all the things that made me happy before in my life, they were all connected to a time when I was creating something. It took me a long time to tell somebody that I was an artist. I was really comfortable saying I'm a school teacher. You know, I have a degree in that. But to tell somebody I was an artist was so, I don't know, that felt very ego-y. And what has given me that confidence that brings me joy now is somebody will walk into the gallery and say, oh, I really like this eggshell work or something, and they don't know that I'm the artist that created it. And getting to see someone react to things that I've created, and the first time to have done it long enough that you run into somebody in a store wearing your earrings, or you see something somebody else likes, or they're buying it for their friends. They say, oh, I've got this and I love it and I want to give it to my friend. All of a sudden that is so incredibly fulfilling that somebody else values and loves something that I made. I think that's where the joy comes now. I was always an artist and I didn't recognize it. And one of my friends, I was telling her, we were having the same conversation, and she laughed and she said, well, we've always known you were an artist. And I just don't think I'd ever thought of it that way. I think artists glow in the dark. I think you see it just like any other personality strength that you're seeking from someone. It's part of their essence, and you feel it really quickly. It's where they're happiest is when they're creating. And if you were going to be an artist and find joy in your life, it doesn't have to be your full-time job. It can be your side gig. It can be your weekend, your evening. But the creativity has to come out of you. For some people, it's about getting out and hiking and being in nature and whatever. For an artist, it's about creating and making sure you're giving yourself opportunities to walk into creative spaces that let your mind go in different directions, that you are putting yourself with people who are equally or more creative and in different ways, because that takes your mind over there with them. It is a fun journey. I had a conversation recently with one of the artists at the gallery, kind of over wine, and we were talking about what's your inspiration? What do you do? Yeah, mine's not that deep. I just am looking for color and joy, and so I surround myself with things that make me happy, and what I create, I want to bring joy to someone else. There's not big, scarred, family tortured history that comes out through my art. I had a happy childhood, had a happy job, I worked with small children. I seek out joy in my life, and so the things that I express are more about, just happiness and joy and the relationships I have. Life is too short. I don't have any interest in spending it on sobering thoughts. I have begun to define the types of mediums I want to work with. And it was always there. The rules, the parameters, the strengths and the weaknesses, or the things that I loved and didn't love, they've always been there. It just took a different lens to look back through time to see how I was building all those skills. Probably the one quote I've ever used in my life over and over: all of your life experiences lead you to who you're supposed to be. And I wouldn't be the creator that I am now had I not gone through all of those challenges. And I think that's probably how I connect so deeply with that kintsugi and the kintsugi eggshell jewelry. There are so many beautiful things that came from the challenges and the parts of my life that were soul sucking. That let me know all the things I don't want to spend my time doing. Even the kintsugi that are very healing, deep quotes and things that you build around, I still see that as that's part of your past that brought you to where you're at. But it's all, for me, about the moving forward, the time that is ahead of me, and bringing joy to that space. What I put out in my artwork is about bringing joy to people. Yeah, no soul sucking here. If I look back on my life and what did I value most in how I spent my time, which now I think everything you do is part of your art, whether you want to be or not, it would be that variety, that there isn't one thing that I sat and did for 20 years. It would be that I've done sculpture and I did community gardening this summer, and my garden grew and I learned from it, and it will be an eclectic pile of stuff, and my children can sell it for 50 cents at a garage sale and I'll be okay with that, because it served its purpose. It brought me joy, and that was good enough. And if it brings somebody else joy and they buy it and it makes them happy, then all the better. But if nobody buys it, I'm okay with that, because it's been a joyful journey for me, and that was enough.